There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome a brand new guest to Bite Size Book Chats. He is infamous on Bookstagram, Ryan from San Jose. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi, thanks for having me, Sean.
It's great to meet you, and I am so envious of all those books behind you. Have you read them all?
I have not. I've read a little number of them. Those are mostly the keepers. I have a whole shelf dedicated to the ones I want to read. So
TBR.
Yeah.
I can't believe I asked you that question. That is the most non-readerly question to ask a reader, isn't it? Have you read them all?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much no. Like book buying is also a hobby. So I like to collect them and look at them. So
I urge everyone, if you're not already following Ryan on Instagram, Books by Ryan. No, what is it?
Read by Ryan.
Read by Ryan. So actually, I thought your name was Brian because I didn't read it right.
I get that all the time.
And Ryan reads a lot of queer fiction, and I think he takes special pride in being one of the first people to tell us all about new books coming out.
Lately, I have been reading a lot of new books, and I've been lucky enough to get some advanced copies of some queer books. So it's been very exciting for me.
Well, happy Pride.
Yes, thank you.
And in fact, I will probably try to get this up during this month. We'll see how that goes. So we are here to talk about a new, what would we call it, a black gay novel?
Yeah, I would say a gay novel about three black friends in the city of Detroit.
It's called Boys Come First, and it's by Aaron Foley, just published last month. And you loved it. Ryan, tell us about it and tell us why.
I loved it. So this is a book about three friends who are black and gay and living in Detroit. Dominic is living in New York at the very beginning of the novel. He has a longtime boyfriend, and he comes home from work after getting fired and finds him in bed with somebody else.
That's the definition of a very, very bad day.
Exactly. And God. What can he do? He drives back home to Detroit where he grew up and stays with his mom. He has a friend, Troy, who he's been friends with since college, I believe. He's a teacher at a charter school in Detroit. And Troy introduces Dominic to his friend, Remy, who's a real estate agent in the Detroit area known as Mr. Detroit. And so these three characters comprise the novel and the different relationships they have, and with other men and with each other.
Okay, so it's a novel about friends, and would you say that they all carry equal weight in the protagonist department?
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know if it exactly maps to every three chapters. Essentially, it covers one of the friends. The sections with Remy are actually told in the first person, and the other sections are told in the third person. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but you get all three pretty equally. And then, of course, they interact with each other throughout the different chapters. It's just the point of view changes.
I have read, or at least skimmed, some of the Goodreads reviews and see some people describe it as a comedy and others describe it as a very dramatic, realist novel. Is it a bit of both? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very real in a lot of ways. The novel takes place in Detroit. I don't know if you've ever been to Detroit.
No.
I'm originally from Michigan, and I spent a lot of time in Detroit. It's historically a very black city. It's very poor. Most people don't go there for tourism. Back in the early 20th century, it was actually known as the Paris of the West. It was so beautiful. But as white people abandoned the city in the middle of the 20th century, the population plummeted and it became a mostly black city. And so the book deals with a lot of very serious issues involving Black people in Detroit who now are struggling with gentrification as white people are moving back in, buying property, changing things, trying to make it, whiter, essentially. And so it deals with a lot of these very serious, very real issues. And it does a great job with that. I really feel like if you read this book, Detroit afterwards. It has the intersections, it has the major roads, it has the culture of Detroit. But at the same time, it's really funny. It's compared on the back of the book by Tim Murphy, who wrote Christadora. He called it a Sex in the City meets Waiting to Exhale about millennial gay Black men.
Okay.
And I think that's very accurate.
So you didn't feel like at any point the tone was a mismatch with the subject matter? It worked well together.
I thought so. It deals with these serious issues, but there's a lot of levity and a lot of fun around the friendships and their sexual escapades and their relationships with other guys, with friends, with their past. So yeah, I thought it was well balanced. It deals with a lot of racism, homophobia, discrimination, like at work with different people. So there are some of those issues.
One reviewer had this quote, when you're gay and Black at the same time, you just have to be extra, extra careful about the gay part.
Mm-hmm.
This is a debut.
Yes. He did write another book called How to Live in Detroit Without Being a Jackass.
Did it work?
But yeah, I think that was nonfiction, but this is his fiction debut. I thought it was really well done. It's not going to be to everybody's taste. There are some scenes that are more descriptive about sex.
I don't know you and haven't followed your posts closely enough, but I'm still going to say that I think that you are very widely read in queer lit.
I try to.
So did this book remind you of any others you'd read? If you like this, you'd like that type of thing. Because to me, the three protagonists that are not romantically involved with each other is a very interesting premise that in clumsy hands would be difficult to pull off, I would think. Quite interesting.
Yeah. A book centered around friendship is less common than romantic relationships, though those are in this book. It's similar to a romance novel in some ways without like the graphic, detailed sexual encounters. It almost reminds me of what chick lit genre, Helen Fielding, Bridget Jones's Diary.
Right.
That type of book. That's what it kind of reminded me of.
Okay.
Very different characters.
With an awareness of social issues that adds a heaviness to it that is balanced really well with all the comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, well, I really want to read this. Ryan, you've done a great job of selling it to me.
I'm glad. I hope more people read it. The inability of me to say what this is like, I think, is one of its strong points. It's not like anything that's out there. Right. And so I think that's really great to see. It takes place in a city that doesn't get a lot of love. Right. And it's a great city with a lot of culture, a lot of great people. And I hope more people read it and get exposed to Detroit.
I think you have been a valuable service toward that end, Ryan. And I also hope that you will come back and talk with me about another book or two or three in the future.
Sure, anytime. This was fun.
I'm delighted to welcome for her debut appearance on Bite Size Book Chats one of my subscribers. I didn't know until a few minutes ago that that's how she found me on Goodreads. Leah from New South Wales in Australia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. And we are here to talk about a new release, an American novel called Trust by Hernan Diaz. I believe this novel really worked for you to the point where you think it might be your book of the year.
It's, in the top 5, definitely.
That's great. So please tell us about the novel and why you loved it so much.
There's not a lot to talk about in it without giving too much away, but it is set in 4 parts. So there's a novel, a manuscript, a memoir, and a journal. And
so 4 different texts which comprise the entire novel.
Yeah. And they all kind of work together to kind of make the narrative go forward. So it's a clever book. I really enjoyed it. The novel part is called Bonds, and it's written by Harold Vanner in the 1920s, and it's based around this wealthy high society couple called Benjamin and Harold Rask. Benjamin Rask, he comes from a wealthy family, but he's made his own name on the stock market. He's got a really good reputation. These fictional characters in the book are based on a real life wealthy couple, Andrew and Mildred Bevel. And so we read the first part, the novel, the fictionalized version of this couple, and then the next 3 parts sort of shed light onto more of the truth of the story. It goes from the Rasks to the sort of, so even though the whole book is fictional, the rest of the story, it's Andrew Bevel and Mildred Bevel that we sort of look at.
Do we see them in the other sections at different other periods in their life, or is it focusing on the same time period in each section?
Around a similar time, but sort of it will go on to the future a little bit and then back into the past.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you're reading it, is there something that's kind of mysterious about it that you're piecing together who these people really are, or is there some kind of a plotty story that's tantalizing you?
Yes, there's a bit of a puzzle to solve about what's really the truth of the story.
Okay.
And so it's not a suspenseful, like mystery thriller type thing, but it's really intriguing. You know, there's more to the story that's in the novel. And as you keep reading it, you sort of discover what that is.
So it starts with a novel?
Yes.
And then the other 3 are what? Memoir and?
A manuscript.
A fictional text or a?
So the manuscript is Andrew Bevel writing about his life story.
Okay.
The memoir is actually by a character called Ida, who has ghostwritten Andrew Bevel's biography.
Oh, this is getting very postmodernist.
Yes.
Yes.
And it really is. The journal, I won't say, because that
right.
is probably the best part.
So I'm imagining that as the reader is reading the various parts, you can't help but reflect on which genre tells the deepest truth.
Yeah. Definitely, that's part of it. Definitely, yeah. I think the other reason that Diaz has done these 4 different formats is to really get different voices for the characters as well. Yeah, so we don't really see the author of Bonds, Harold Vanner, in any of the stories. But writing that novel in a certain style, you really get a sense of the character of Harold Vanner as well through it. So, yeah, I think the character sort of writing in this book has been done really well. Yeah.
Would you describe it more of a plot-driven novel, character-driven novel, or a mix of both?
Mix of both. Maybe character more than plot. I think if you're looking for a strong plot, you might get a little bit bored.
Which is interesting to hear you say that, because you have also said that there's a lot of things you can't talk about. So there must be something to do with the plot, or maybe it's about the characters that is a kind of a mystery until later in the book.
Yeah, and like you said, when it being postmodern, it's just really, really a story about storytelling. Instead of there being a really traditional plot, I think, unpacking the way he's written everything is what is intriguing and sort of propels you forward in the reading as well.
Without getting into any spoilers, can you tell us why this novel is called Trust?
Well, there's the money element.
That trust has a couple different meanings. So
yes,
the financial trust.
Yep, and then the storytelling part of trust as well.
Can you trust the narrator?
Yeah.
Reliable narrator. Okay. And how about trust between characters? Would that also emerge as something?
Yeah, it would. Yes.
Multifaceted. Yeah. I am really intrigued, Leah. You have sold it to me completely.
That's good.
Thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and tell us about another book someday.
I will. Thanks you very much.
Freddie from Malaysia and from the fabulous BookTube channel, The Sluggish Reader, is back. Freddie, welcome back.
Hello again.
We're here to read a Chinese novel, Strange Beasts of China by Yan Ge, translated from the Chinese by Jeremy Tiang. And I didn't know until about 10 days ago. I have the book myself unread, and I didn't know until about 10 days ago that the author is female. Suddenly, it's that much more interesting to me. You liked it. Tell us about it.
Strange Beasts of China is a very interesting book. It is, I guess I'm going to start with the structure first. So basically, the original title of Strange Beasts of China is literally just Catalog of Strange Beasts. So the way that this book is organized is that we have a series of short stories / chapters that are sort of loosely connected with one another, in which each of these short stories focuses on a particular kind of strange beast that apparently live in this fictional Chinese city called Yong'an. And so central to this novel, we have our protagonist, a novelist, a nameless novelist, who is gathering stories about these different strange beasts. From there, we sort of see how these strange beasts are like, their physical appearances and how they interact with the human society in Yong'an. But in summary, we can sort of say that these different kinds of strange beasts, they can all pass as humans, except for some minor physical differences that may set them apart from regular human beings, although those differences can be fairly well hidden. And these strange beasts can also have other features that sets them apart from regular humans as well, like maybe some of them consume emotions, for example, or some of them are parasitic, some of them reproduce in different ways. But I guess at the same time, more important side of these stories is also how human beings interact with these strange beasts in their society, how these two groups of physiologically different beings coexist together.
Wow. So this does not strike me as typical realistic literary fiction. Was that a fair assumption?
Yes, it's a fair assumption. Some may say that it is somewhat of a magical realist novel, although I would say it's kind of different from what you usually see in a typical magical realist novel. It definitely contains a lot of fantastical elements to it. Much of the realistic rules that we see in our real life doesn't exactly apply in the world of this novel, so it might be quite jarring to some people.
And the protagonist is collecting these stories. You said she's a writer?
Yes, she's a writer.
So she's collecting the stories to put into a novel or some kind of writing?
If I'm not mistaken, she's actually collecting these stories so that she can write each of these stories and submit them to the newspaper. That's how she earns her living.
Do we know, or do you know, or is it revealed in the book that these mythological creatures, would that be a good adjective to use? Mythological creatures?
I wouldn't use that word, because I wasn't really able to place these creatures.
That's kind of the question I'm trying to formulate is, do these Do these have a base within the realm within the canon of Chinese mythology, or is it all a wholly new creation out of the mind of this novelist?
This was my question also while I was reading this one. I consider myself to be fairly familiar to the so-called canon of Chinese mythology, and I think that many of these they are not exactly something that I have encountered before. But maybe if there are other viewers out there who knows more about this, they can comment. Obviously,
sure.
They come across to me like as if these are the creations of the authors herself. Maybe having some inspirations from mythology, but as far as the nature of the beasts themselves, they feel kind of like unique creations.
You began your review on Goodreads with this intriguing sentence. I was tempted to read this as a significantly allegorical novel, and I shouldn't have done so. Please tell us more about that.
I actually started reading this novel with a particular expectation. I thought that it was going to be some kind of a social commentary because, how this novel is going to involve like magical beasts, strange beasts, stuff. And I thought that those magical beasts are going to be kind of like stand-ins or allegory for whatever groups of disenfranchised people in real life. And I thought that's kind of interesting. And when I got into the story, I realized that kind of reading starts to fall apart because when I do that, I would usually try to form some kind of parallels between the books I'm reading and also the real life. And certain details that emerge in the books just sort of doesn't fit with whatever I can construct in real life or whatever I see in real life. And this book contains plenty of bizarre details that just does not make sense in real life. I think it's because of that. And I start to enjoy it less and less because of that. And yeah.
But this was a 5-star read for you. So you somehow shifted gears. And then so how did you approach it? Once you realized you were reading it, that the allegorical reading wasn't paying off?
So I started to focus more on the bizarre details that this novel is highlighting, especially on how bizarre the strange beasts are. Not only that, the interaction between these strange beasts and also with the author, the novelist, not the author of the book, but the novelist protagonist, how she interacts with the strange beast also feels kind of bizarre. When we're reading books about supposedly, say, persecuted people, we would have certain levels of sympathy, but the way that the protagonist talks to or interacts with these beasts, it feels like there is a particular set of rules in this novel. And as a result, this whole thing, the universe of this novel just feels very absurd. It feels very dreamlike. And I started to just see it as a very silly kind of a novel. In fact, it's a very goofy novel. There are so many hilarious bits in there.
That was really my next question. It's described as whimsical, playful.
It's whimsical, but to a certain extent. It's more dark than whimsical. Okay. They are, this book is probably about 80% dark comedy and 20% whimsical.
With some fairly serious metaphysical or philosophical kind of preoccupations of the text as well.
It's
or not.
There is element of that, but it's fairly minor, but it's certainly noticeable. The book feels sort of metafictional in the sense that once you finish this whole book, you sort of realize that it contains some commentary on the nature of writing as a job, especially writing fiction. There are quite a few bits in this novels where those commentaries are sprinkled throughout. So.
Well, it sounds interesting, and I'm going to tell you that I don't think it's a Sean book, and I don't think I'm going to try it. It doesn't sound like the kind of book where I would get invested. where I would get invested in the character herself, the protagonist. Do you have a rebuttal to that? Can you make one last attempt to convince me I should give it a try?
To be honest, I was also quite intrigued by the fact that you approached me about talking about this book.
Yeah.
Because while I was reading this book, I thought to myself, this is definitely not a Sean book.
I'm such a type, eh? You're not going to try to talk me out of it, because it doesn't really sound like it's going to be for me, but it's going to be a book that a lot of other people out there will probably enjoy.
I would say it's my kind of a book.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for telling us about it, Freddie.
Thank you.
I am delighted to welcome Matthew, an Irish guy in Poland, back for his second appearance on Bite Size Book Chats. Matthew, welcome back.
Glad to be back. Thank you, Sean.
Matthew had a book channel. It's currently on hiatus, so it was called Bottle Imp Books, his booktube channel. Matthew, you think that you might come back someday?
Yes. I'm always threatening it, Sean. So hopefully.
In the meantime, I'm going to put a link to Matthew's Instagram account where you can stay tuned for an update in that regard. We are here to talk about a fascinating sounding work of nonfiction. It is called The Hero's Way, Walking with Garibaldi from Rome to Ravenna by Tim Parks. Came out last summer of 2021. And I don't know very much about this book, and that's why Matthew is here. Matthew, tell us about this book.
So Tim Parks is a prolific writer. His career seems to there's a lot of fiction. I've never read his fiction. He's also written a lot of different nonfiction works, and some of them are travel logs. So that this is kind of in that sphere. He decided in 2019, inspired by a diary of one of the soldiers in Garibaldi's forces, to retrace Garibaldi's march from Rome to Ravenna following the First Italian War of Independence. So it's a 400-mile trek. So Tim Parks is doing the walk with his partner, and as he makes the journey, it's probably more than half of it is focused on a historical account of Garibaldi's march north. Then it keeps coming back to Tim Parks and his partner and their experiences trying to make this thing.
So I suspect I'm not the only one that hasn't given a second thought to Garibaldi since my undergraduate history course. So can you give us a 1 or 2 minute refresher on who the heck Garibaldi was?
You kind of have four main figures in the Risorgimento, the unification of Italy, which happened in 1861. You've got Mazzini, Cavour, the King Vittorio Emanuele II, and Garibaldi. And of those four, Garibaldi is very much remembered as being the man of action. He grew up in Nice. And then, as a young man, he joined the Merchant Navy. He went to South America. He got involved in revolutionary activities in Brazil, I think, then went south to Uruguay, became a teacher, but was still also actively involved in revolutionary activity. And then when he saw the opportunity to go sail back to Italy to take part in the cause for reunifying Italy, then that's exactly what he did. And then he became, by most historians' accounts, a pretty extraordinary general of fighters, given that he didn't have any traditional military background. One of these men that seemed to be born for action, that seemed to have some sort of destiny. Tim Parks, he had referred to Garibaldi as the only admirable man in 19th century history. He was really anti-church and anti-clerical, so that was another thing that was a sort of prominent thing in his life. He wanted to stick it to all these
the entrenched conservative elites. Yeah. So are you a history teacher? Because if not, I think you should consider that as a future occupation, Matthew.
No, although that was that was what I took my degree in, was history. I focused on Russian history, which has become quite relevant of late. And, that's part of what drew me to this book, is that you don't realize it, but a lot of the things that were relevant in this book and figures like Garibaldi, and I think a lot of people forget that, Italy is only unified in 1861. Germany only becomes a unified state in 1868. Poland didn't exist in the 19th century. It only gets its independence back in the First World War. So the conception we have these days of nationality and of the nation state is very much a 19th century invention. And so this is still a fresh thing, and it's still something we're fighting over. So
on topic for recent events, I have just noticed in the synopsis for this book that Garibaldi's pregnant wife, Anita, is a fairly important person in this historical walk that he took, that Tim Parks and his partner are retracing.
She was a major figure in his life, and she sadly died on one of the journeys.
They are retracing the steps of this couple. So is there an analogy that's being made? Or Tim Parks and his partner, who I'm assuming is female?
Yeah. Ella.
So are they kind of making analogies as they're doing this about that they're retracing as another couple, retracing the steps of Garibaldi and Anita, or?
No, and I think this is one of the weakness of the books, is that the Tim Parks, his comments on contemporary Italy are quite. I think he's quite known in his books for being of a sort of grumpy temperament, or always has a sort of a sour or sneering kind of tone, and that can be funny at times. But here, when he's talking about his walk, it's often very much the quotidian, the feeling of exhaustion, the blisters on their feet, the backpacks where they're staying, and he does contrast that with him and his partner are aware of how the soldiers would have been, wounded and sleeping wherever they could, find shade from the sun, or whereas they're staying in Airbnbs and hotels. But I did find that the weaker aspect of it, the more interesting sections were certainly the historical side of it for me. Yeah, I probably would have preferred with the contemporary stuff if there was more of a investigation into contemporary Italian politics, because as I said, there is that parallel to be drawn between the nationalism that was born in the 19th century and some of the things going on today.
So if you're primarily interested in the historical, this is a book for you. But if you're looking for something that also paints a vivid, relevant picture of contemporary Italy, this might not be so much for you.
No, because he is a foreigner and he's lived in Italy for a long time, but he still seems to me, he always very much seems an Englishman abroad. He does refer to, I don't know if you're aware, but in Italian politics in recent years, you've seen this rise of the Lega party. They used to be quite a fringe party because their raison d'etre was they were arguing that Veneto, one of the richest regions in Italy, should break off and be an independent state. And as they started to win support, strangely, in the South and in parts of the country where, they were quite openly anti-Southern Italian, but people started voting for them. And so they basically dropped the Nord from their name and sort of dropped that whole push for independence. And so this guy, the leader of that party, is Matteo Salvini, and Tim Parks does refer to him a few times throughout. But at the end, he says he's received a letter from a university professor. He says, a cultured woman, and she says, our only hope after this catastrophe, and I think she's talking about the rise of Salvini, that kind of anti-EU that EU skepticism within Italy. She says, if we are to avoid sliding into South American anarchy, our hope is Germany. I fear the South and its corruption. I feel closer to the French and the Germans. I don't mind surrendering sovereignty to them. 400 miles away on the tiny island of Caprera, Garibaldi turns in his grave. So this is Tim Parks writing again. Like a nightmare, he wrote, Italy is weighed down by a terrible conviction of its own weakness, especially among those classes accustomed to a comfortable life. But he added, a people not disposed to bend the knee is invincible. I don't know about you, but my reading has been greatly affected by the war in Ukraine, and a lot of things do seem somehow almost decadent now in light of the war. And so my reading has become much more political of late, I suppose.
Well, I'm going to segue off that to say that I hope you will come back, because you bring a very unique perspective and a different range of books than any of my other guests. So thank you so much for telling us about this one.
I'm glad to be here, and yeah, happy to come back and discuss something else.